Well, thanks for clicking on to the 27th edition of the Global Weather and Climate Report. This was the scenes captured in Auckland, New Zealand in the last week or so. We've seen upwards of a month's worth of rain falling within just a single day, and we've had several deaths, unfortunately, caused by just day after day of very, very heavy rainfall. So, this, of course, has been grabbing the headlines and even grabbing the global warming headlines in recent times as well. So take it whatever way you want with regards to that side of the argument, but certainly tremendous amounts of rainfall fallen in the New Zealand area in the last several days here. A tweet by our good friend Maximiliano Herrera talks about a record deluge in Auckland, New Zealand, with 240 millimetres rainfall within a 24-hour period, the maximum ever recorded. Some areas of the city had over 155 millimetres fall within just a 3-hour period, and upwards of a quarter to a half a year's worth of rainfall in the space of a few days. So this has been the big story actually across the southern hemisphere in recent days with this situation here. We will look at other temperature records and whether it be heat and cold over the last week or so as well in today's video. This is the past 60 days, the 2 meter temperature anomalies here for the globe, and you can see it has been a very cool summer overall across Australia, which is quite interesting and something that isn't often mentioned, unfortunately. We've had also a pretty cool winter actually so far. Now, 60 days, of course, doesn't incorporate the entire winter so far, unfortunately, but you get the overall gist of it. It's been warm across Europe, across much of northern Asia, if you notice here, including Siberia, despite the fact that we've had some very significant cold, record breaking, all time record breaking cold in the last month or so. When you combine the period from really the beginning of December right the way through to early February, it has on the large scale been quite warm actually. Much of North America, with the exceptions of the northern plains and the western United States, has been generally warm as well. And when you look at Europe, it has been actually slightly below normal across parts of the Republic of Ireland as well as northern Britain here. And I would argue that it has been pretty much close to average across England and Wales. But there's no getting away from the fact that it has been a very warm winter across Europe, and these are the current temperatures as of recording at 12 minutes past 6 p.m. Very mild across the southern half of the UK, mild across the board, but particularly so across the southeast, as you can see here. But even temperatures like for the sunset now, and we're talking the 3rd of February. There is not a lot of cold air really across much of Europe at the moment, including up towards Iceland at this moment in time. Of course, we do have well advertised here on the channel the outbreak of polar vortex air within the troposphere that is expected to drop south over the course of tonight. So the core of cold, this is going to be a very, very quick shot of very cold conditions through the 24-hour period, and then the temperatures are going to recover pretty significantly, very quickly indeed. Low single figures, I think, in terms of Fahrenheit for New York City. Temperatures possibly down to minus 10 Fahrenheit in Boston with this Arctic outbreak. Could get minus 30s, even minus 40s across parts of northern upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. Wind chills. Some of the National Weather Service forecasts up in upstate Maine is pretty outrageous actually, sending the temperature, the real feel, so that's the combination of the air temperature and the wind chill, of minus into the minus 80s, so minus 50s, minus 60s Celsius. So that is an extreme outbreak of cold air, that's for sure, for the northeast corner of the United States, but it is very much focused on the northeast. And when you look at the 2 meter temperature anomaly chart here for the last 70 days, or 60 days, sorry, it's been very, very mild indeed. It's been, I believe it's been considered one of the mildest winters so far in Canada. I think it was the second warmest January on record for Canada. But even for the United States, I think it was one of the warmest Januaries on record here as well. I think 2006 stands out as a particularly warm January for the lower 48. But of course, for the 60-day period, so this is the majority of the winter, it's been cold across the western half of the United States. We've had temperatures in parts of the Sierra Nevada around the Bridgeport area of California, temperatures down to minus 32 Fahrenheit, which is pretty impressive cold for this region. We also seen a temperature of minus 62 Fahrenheit in parts of Utah, Peters Sink. We've got a couple of very, very high elevation sinks within the topography, and with very high elevation, you've got very dry air, snow-covered ground. Conditions are perfect for maximum radiational cooling, and these sinkholes within the landscape tend to experience exceptionally cold conditions, way beyond anything out with the general vicinity. You might have temperatures, say for example, in areas surrounding it, maybe only just a mile or two away, but you could have temperature difference of 20, 30 degrees Fahrenheit. So a very, very impressive situation there. So let's have a quick look at Thierry Goose's latest feed on Twitter. And interestingly, Vancouver in British Columbia has recorded measurable snowfall for the first time since 1988 and 89 for the combined months of November, December, January, and February. They've recorded snowfall and measurable snow, and that's the first time since 88 and 89, which is quite interesting. Here's a tweet here by Patrick Duplessis, I think it is. Very warm January for most of Canada, the second warmest for Yellowknife, fourth warmest for Toronto and Montreal. Meanwhile, Baffin Island was slightly colder than average, so the cold has been kind of bottled up further north, but the majority of Canada well above average temperature-wise. And indeed, back on the 1st of February, this is quite an interesting one because I believe New York City's had the warmest January on record. Central Park measured its first snowfall of the entire winter, which is pretty amazing actually. And this is the latest first measurable snowfall for the season since record keeping began in 1869. So there you go, first snowfall in New York City of the season, and you have to go all the way back to a very long period of record as well, actually, may I add. So that's quite interesting to see. We've also had the all-time record-breaking cold for the month of January. Bear in mind that's like the equivalent of July for Antarctica, minus 51.2 at Concordia on the 31st of January 2023, minus Dome Fuji, Dome A, Plateau Station, Vostok. All-time record-breaking cold temperatures down in Antarctica, which is quite interesting to see. All-time January record heat in Chad and in Africa. There we go, minus 62.1 or minus 52.3 Celsius recorded at Peters Sink in Utah. Only 2.1 degrees Celsius away from the all-time record here, so quite interesting stuff. Japan's had some very cold temperatures, very cold in Hokkaido at minus 32.6 Celsius, the coldest in Japan for the entire winter, out with, I believe, Mount Fuji, at the top of Mount Fuji, and that's quite interesting to see. So yeah, some very interesting things going on around the world at the moment here. We've had all-time record-breaking high temperatures as well as all-time record-breaking cold temperatures for the month of January as well. Just trying to kind of skip through as I speak to see anything that really stands out. Minus 36.1 at the top of Mount Fuji, which of course is way up at 4,000 or 5,000 meters above sea level. Cold temperatures, by the way, in northern Africa. We had temperatures down in Algeria, some high elevation, so that 826 meters above sea level. Batna, minus 7.3 Celsius, which is quite interesting to see. But even near the coast of the Mediterranean, temperatures down to freezing or slightly below freezing, which is quite impressive actually for the North Sahara Desert. So so very interesting stuff indeed. And let's have a quick look at the situation with regards to ourselves here in the UK and indeed Europe. So of course we've had some fairly windy conditions during last night into this morning with the passage of a frontal system. Now we've got, of course, an area of high pressure that's going to build in. We've got a frontal system, by the way, that moves in during the course of tonight and into tomorrow. That frontal system pushes through, and then the area of high pressure really builds overhead across the UK at 1045 millibars, as you can see here. So tomorrow, we're going to have a mild day. Cloudy conditions, southwest winds, temperatures across the board, double figures. Might have 13 or 14 in the south of England, by the way, tomorrow. But even across the north, we're going to have temperatures probably close to double digits. We've actually got close to double digits at the moment here. This is my weather station at Marvel and Weather HQ. Current temperature of 9.5 Celsius. So very mild, as you can see. Of course, you look at the European picture. We've got a mild setup. Looking closely at the British Isles for the current temperatures anyway, and you can see here, it's dropping a little bit, as you can see here, down to 4 degrees at 10, but across the southeast of the UK, temperatures in double figures. But so we're going to have a mild day tomorrow. Once that frontal system pushes through, we're going to see temperatures dropping off. Ahead of that front, temperatures warm up, and if we skip back, you can see here that frontal system moving through. So we're in the warm sector before that cold front moves through, hence the temperatures rising. Once that pushes through, we're in the colder air. Very different picture. Saturday, mild, double figures, even teens in the southeast. During the day on Sunday, all of us, once that frontal system pushes through, we're in the colder air. So we'll have temperatures tomorrow morning 5, 6, even 9 Celsius across the northern half of the UK to start Saturday morning. Sunday morning, below freezing, and temperatures well below freezing, I think, in rural areas. So it's going to be very much a weekend of two halves. Saturday being mild, Sunday being somewhat colder, but close to average. There's nothing to write home about. Then that area of high pressure lingers through into the early portion of next week. We've got an approaching frontal system from the west, but it's all eyes on that high over Europe, and there is still unknowns with regards to that area of high pressure. Does it get far enough north to open the door to some colder air coming in from the east? Certainly that there, this is Wednesday at 9 a.m. off the GFS operational chart. So of course there is still chopping and changing going on. But if we put up the 850 temperature chart here, it is slightly cold, as you can see here. Nothing to write home about though, if you notice. If we play through the loop, you see cold air coming in from the west, cold air coming in from the east. So we're in that battleground. The UK is going to be sandwiched between potential easterlies versus westerlies, and that's quite interesting to see here. Let's have a look at the latest run of the ECMWF chart here and actually see what that's showing. Let's go to the overview chart, which remember that model has not been as bullish on an easterly type setup here, developing here. So let's play it back to the current situation. Frontal system moves through during the course of tomorrow. High pressure builds in 1046, 1047 millibars. Some pretty strong area of high pressure that is. Then as we go towards the early portion of next week, another frontal system moving in towards the northwest. Notice here it kind of fades out and pressure builds over the UK here. So that's quite interesting here. It's trying to push back the Atlantic here, as you can see. We'll look at the 850 temperatures before I run out of time here. Skip back, play through the loop. Shows the cold air plunging into eastern portions of Europe. There's that area of high pressure. Cold in the east side, west side. Cold air trying to move in. I've run out of time, unfortunately, here. Continue to watch next week. Stay tuned. Subscribe if you haven't already done so. See you.